You are watching the number one podcast in the whole entire youth wrestling community, and I'm one of your hosts, Juanzo.
And I'm your other host, Jean-Paul Leek.
And together we are Rope Break. And how's every single one of you? We hope all of you are doing fine. And it's time to talk about another episode of the Broken Skull Sessions with Stone Cold Steve Austin. And this is one, a very particular one, because we never thought that this could have happened. Right, Paul?
Yeah, the forbidden door is open. You know, this is the 15th one, and this is probably, like we said, the most watched one, besides, I would say, maybe The Undertaker's 2 episodes, but this might even, surpass that. I don't know the numbers. I don't even know if you can look those numbers up, but everybody wanted to see this because it was like, what's Jericho going to say? You couldn't believe that there is, a big, you almost want to say crossover, that these brands are merging, because we know WWE was always against acknowledging other wrestling promotions, but maybe Vince is getting lax in his later years. Maybe he thinks, screw it, because the one line that Stone Cold and Jericho said towards the end of it, this isn't about AEW, WWE, whatever. It's about the fans and their love of all of wrestling.
Yes, exactly. Like that was really cool. So we're going to be talking about everything, family. Thank you for being with us. Thank you for all the love you give us. And also, don't forget to check out, the reviews that we have for every single one of you. Yesterday, the WrestleMania Night 2, the head of the table reigns supreme. Like, a lot of people are upset about this result. We were saying, what a wonderful triple threat match. We were thinking maybe Edge, maybe Daniel Bryan. They didn't do any of that, but they give us the head of the table. He retained the championship. So, Night 2, we will say, better wrestling, but the winners were not really good, right, Paul?
Yeah, exactly. Almost heels won every match except Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn. It was a heel-dominated show. Some really good matches, and the one thing I will say for a lot of this is it makes you, if you're really interested in, especially in the WWE product, Night 2 was the hook. You're going to want to see where they go from a lot of these feuds, a lot of these outcomes, but, go listen to all our thoughts in depth, check out the review.
Exactly. So, let's start with this interview, Paul. So, they, Jericho, like you said, Forbidden Door, and they started the conversation from the very beginnings, the days of Lionheart, the days of Corazon de Leon, Jericho that fell in love with wrestling, and then he starts, going his road, his path to, make the WCW, ECW, and you see, this Chris Jericho that always had a plan. And he has all his matches written down. So that's something that a lot of people wouldn't know about him, but he had documents of every single one of his matches. I really like that fact. I didn't know that.
He had the book or whatever, that 30 Years of Jericho for all his matches, a little bit, little description of each match, kind of what happened. And, that was really cool. And I like how he said, too, it's he always wanted to be a rock star. That was his thing was just he watched wrestling with his grandma. She hated Jesse Ventura. He loved Jesse because he always loved the heels. And he's I want to be either a wrestler or a rock star. That was his goal. And he, became both. Maybe the rock star, some people I know hate, Judith or Fozzy, but,
No, Judith is, but when you hear it every single Wednesday night, you kind of lose interest when it comes to that. But like you said, he was able to do both. And like you said, the book is called actually The Complete List of Jericho. And that's Alex Marvez, the guy that actually is one of the interviewers in AEW. He's the one that also, he's a journalist, so he was able to, to transcribe everything, all those papers that Jericho had, and he had, all documents of all his matches. So that was a really cool fact. But then we go to the Jericho, ECW, he mentions he was there for a little bit, maybe, a few weeks. Remember how he was trying to get a hold of Paul Heyman? Oh, yeah, I'm on the phone with, Ricky Steamboat right now. I'll get back to you. And then nothing will happen. But you always saw that Jericho that wanted to, go to other promotions, make his name, be known. And, Mexico, he did okay with, Corazon de Leon. So, remember, and kind of a younger Shawn Michaels.
Yeah, because he said, he always had a plan. He's if I can just get booked in Mexico. Because at first, he sent things to, the Hart train. Not the Hart. I don't think it was the Hart family dungeon, but it was, the Hart brothers. So it might have been Stu. Not Stu, but, one of the other, Hart brothers or something. He trained with them. Then he's if I can just go to Mexico and I can be pretty good there, maybe if I hang around enough, Ultimo Dragon will come around and he'll see me. Then he can take me to Japan. And, it seemed like his plan, every step, happened the way he wanted it to, which was good.
Exactly. Then a show is in LA, and then he has in that show. It was a beneficial show, and Conan was right there, and then Eric Bischoff was also there. So Eric Bischoff is the one that takes him to the WCW. Then we get to see the Jericho. More a cruiserweight. I remember how the legit promo with the 1,000 holes, the man of 1,004 holes, and the overpowering Dean Malenko with the man of 1,000 holes, because that was his nickname. And then armbar, and then he'll say something else, and then another thing. armbar. So like that great promo and that great program that he had with Dean Malenko. That was
and I love how and when they went in like the behind the scenes thing, he's like, yeah, then when it went to commercial, I was saying, oh, all the teams suck here, the White Sox, all he just was shitting
Red Sox,
on the sports teams there, and then when they come back, a whole number 87. Armbar. Like, and then Stone Cold's like, that was a good way to get the crowd really booing you to come back, and then everybody watching at home was led to believe he was just reading this list through the whole commercial. So Jericho, even then, he was smart in a way to get himself over. Like he said, any amount of TV time he was given, whether it was 1 minute or 20 minutes, he was going to make the most of it.
Yes.
Even early on in his career, he kind of had that mindset.
Yeah, really early on, like you said, he had good matches with Eddie Guerrero, but mostly cruiserweight. Remember, he never went to that, like heavyweight, like I'm gonna hang out with everybody with Nash.
And he even said, and he brought up a good point where he's like, we had all these legit guys in the cruiserweights, even though cruiserweight now is 205 and under, but he's like, I was 225, but I was just put in with those guys. And Benoit was kind of like in that mix too a little bit. He wasn't really a cruiserweight either. It's like all those guys who are just, they're not 6'8", 300 pounds. Otherwise, you're a cruiserweight. But he's like, why wasn't I having a match, with Lex Luger? And, one of these other guys having a match with Hogan, having a match with Sting, with Randy, with Flair. Let's get each other over instead of the same old timers going against the old timers.
Yes.
It doesn't create any good business and it doesn't get anybody over.
He mentioned that he does that idea now in AEW. And remember, we mentioned the feud with Orange Cassidy. Some parts of it with him, we thought it was okay. Maybe him winning and then Orange winning all the other 2 times. Well, didn't make a lot of sense. But like you see that Jericho had that mindset of putting other guys over. The mentioning of AEW from the get-go. Oh, what happened when you did AEW? All of that. But then they went back to go through the whole career. Then they had like that beautiful spot with like the 2 Stooges, like mimicking Goldberg. That was awesome. And
what was it? Spinal Tap. Yeah, where they can't find their way to the stage.
Find the ring. He tries to find the ring, and then he doesn't find it. And then at the end, he is able to go through the ring. And then they had like that little piece of pyro, like. Psh.
Yeah, and so, I love how he's like, yeah, he never even had the match then with Goldberg. Like he said, they wanted to do it on TV. He's like, why don't Goldberg's gonna win? He's gonna kick my ass in Goldberg fashion. This isn't gonna be a contest, but do it on pay-per-view. Make the fans, pay to see it. And it was just like, no. So it was just,
Yeah, exactly. They didn't have the match, so they had a beef for after he left. He went to WWE. So there was a lot of time that they had that beef. But remember, like that was the one thing that WCW always did: gave the matches on free TV. They never were like able to have people pay for this stuff. So you saw Jericho; he's good in WCW, a lot of championships, but then he decides to go to WWE. And then he got that meeting with Vince. Like he's put right there in his house. Shane O'Mac opens the door. Hey man, how you doing?
But the best line of was like, if a man can't have 2 brownies, what can he have?
Yeah.
And they're eating. He's like, because he thought he's like everything was a test. He's like, I'm trying to be all like jacked and all this stuff. And then they bring out a tray of brownies and it smells good. And we all take one. He's like, should I take one? Well, that like what should I do? And they eat one. He's like, then Vince and I are sitting there. We look at the tray and he's like, well, if a man can't have 2 brownies in this world, what can he have? And he's like, take one, Chris. And then they eat it. And it's like, he's like, oh, this was all.
They told him, he's like, once your contract is up, let us know. So then after that, he comes out, his girlfriend is right there. He's like, the girlfriend's like, well, how did it go? It's like, I don't really know. I don't really know. But it was thanks to Vince Russo and Don Callis. He mentions Don Callis throughout this whole interview. He says that that was the reason why he wanted to get done in the WWE. And remember his debut in Interrupting the Rock. That was also really cool. And then he reveals that like Michael Jackson is the one that did that. How the arms like standing and then giving his back to the crowd and all of that. So that's Y2J at the beginning with the countdown. He revealed also like how he got the idea. He saw that countdown to the millennium. Vince Russo and him one more time. And Jericho, the first years were okay. Like maybe like a baby face at the beginning. The matches with China, Jeff Jarrett for the IC belt, also with Hardcore Holly, and then that big match that he had on Penn State when he wins the title for 2 seconds.
Yeah, and he even said he was just like like a legit debut, okay, and then just kind of started up here, and then like it was kind of bullshit, like yeah. I love when he said he had that match with Triple H. He's like, we didn't like each other. Even like before I signed there, there was just his animosity, whatever, didn't like each other. But he's like, I knew in the ring I could trust this guy. As a wrestler, I could trust in the ring. Even if we hated each other's guts after the bell rang, I knew once we were in the ring, he was going to lead and it was going to be good.
Oh yeah, man, and the pop is huge, and he's one of the most the biggest pops ever. In the top 10 that they did, like one, I remember years ago they did like the best pops of all time, and he was like number 10 or something, because like remember he wins the title and everybody's like whoa, because Aaron Hebner like gives them the title, he has the spinning heel kick like the lion salt, and then 1 2 3, and everybody had even I was like when I saw that like oh my god, he got the title, it's great. Then he has to like give it back, and he's like, oh, maybe I shouldn't give back. Like he, as Vince is like, don't worry, you'll have that at some point. So like you saw that there was always that trust. And did you like that version of Jericho, Y2J, all of that? That was.
Oh, I mean, yeah, that's actually one of my favorite versions of Jericho, like the WCW and then into like the WWE. I like that Jericho. Like he said, he has the Gene Simmons hair because Stone Cold's like, you're the only guy who could get that hair over. He's like, no, there's two guys, me and Gene Simmons, because that's who he took it from. So, always had the rock star, rocker influence in everything he did. And, that's my favorite version of Jericho, I would say.
Oh yeah,
just because it's like, I mean, Attitude Era, there's the nostalgia and everything, but also I feel like that's when he was his most legit in the ring as well.
Yeah, no, yeah, like remember those matches with Angle, with Benoit, all of those, great guys in there, like WrestleMania 16, my bad, WrestleMania 2000 is Benoit and Angle. And like IC belt and European belt, and then Angle loses both of the titles, and Jericho wins European. So all of that, and then he goes like also with Triple H that same year. He goes into Last Man Standing. That's when Triple H also injures himself with like the triceps and all of that. So great career up to that. Then he becomes finally undisputed champion, and I'm pretty sure that you heard that like. About the story before, how he eats the cold pizza, like that guy Junior.
Oh yeah, where he's just like, oh, I locked my card in my room, and he's like, well, I need to see some ID.
You need to see your ID. I need to see your ID.
And he's like, if you unlock this room, you're gonna see two belts laying on the bed because I'm the fucking undisputed champion. And he opens it. So.
And then like, yeah, and then he eats like like a cold pizza, because even the pizza falls on the floor and all of that. And like the one line I love is like how Roddy Piper says that like when you're the main event, it's like the loneliest position ever, because everybody else leaves because they want to beat traffic. So, Jericho, when he became an undisputed champion, for me as a fan, I was really happy. The match with Triple H at Mania 18 wasn't that great, or like completely overshadowed by Hulk Hogan and The Rock. But Jericho, I think he delivered on that. He beat the old Rock and Stone Cold in the same night in Vengeance. And remember, like even Booker T was out. So like they had a lot of studs in him. Although like it took forever for him to get to that main event status. I want to say on that. Then, they talk about the match with Shawn. What are your thoughts on this match with Shawn? That was a great match.
I mean, Shawn, he's always money. I mean, of course, he has, like, the bullshit haircut there. He looks like somebody's mom. But, I mean, it's just, like, the match is good. And, like they said, the story, it was set up like, oh, you're my idol. You're my hero. I kind of, looked up to you, wanted to be like you. And he's like, the end of the match, it was never Jericho's going to win. It was always Shawn's going to win. It was his first WrestleMania back since he lost to Stone Cold. And they're like, Shawn was always going to win. But Pat Patterson was like, well, how about, because Shawn's going to win, if Jericho wins, Shawn wins, okay, whatever, it's a great match. But the thing everybody will talk about is the ending. That you get your heat. You kick him in the nuts. He kind of slides down and then, then it's like people will be booing Jericho, and then maybe, next Raw, next show, they're going to want to see Jericho get his ass kicked. Because if he would have lost clean, they hugged, and he just walked off, everybody would be like, oh, okay.
What is the one thing is like, it's clean, so what does that mean? Done. It's done. It's like, let's move on to something else. You have always like that old school mentality. Exactly. And that's what it is. So, but like you said, by adding the kick and all of that, is like, oh, you get more heat. So maybe you keep doing that match, which I think they did. But then, we got to see this version of Jericho. Then he tagged with Christian, all these for 2003, 2004. IC Bell reigns. He has 9 all together. Like he did a lot of things, but then in 2005, he completely, loses interest in wrestling. The B word, burned out. And it's like, oh, don't even say it.
And that's what he said. That was going to be the first time he's thinking about retiring. 15-year career, and now he's at 30 years. So it's like,
It's true. It's true. And then he left, like I remember clearly that episode, because like he loses that match with Cena, because he actually was challenging for Cena's WWE Championship at that time, and then he gets exit out, like he gets all the security.
That's the one where they carry him out, right?
Yes. Yeah,
because I love when he said, he's like, I want to have this big moment, have it be funny, have it everybody remember it. I don't want to have the retirement match and be crying and oh thanks. He's like, no, if I leave, if I have to leave, I want it to be where I'm kicking and screaming like a baby throwing a tantrum, because it's memorable. You
Yes.
know what I mean? That is one of, now obviously everybody remembers like retirement matches like Ric Flair and stuff, but a lot of people remember that segment with Jericho too.
Oh yeah, they do, because again he was crying, and he did indeed leave. Like we didn't see him. He went to focus more on Fozzy, or like doing all those other endeavors, like good looking in future endeavors. There you go. So he did that, and then he comes back in 07. The promos were good. I didn't even know that was going to come back, but it was like more into the lines like the internet. You will see like like letters and just like passwords, and in the end everything will say save as Y2J, and I was like, oh, he's Jericho. He comes back, he challenged Randy Orton. At the beginning, again, the same old Jericho, but then he's like, no, I need to change. I need to, like, fresh the gimmick. He's like, no more mentions of Y2J, no, like, long trunks. No, I got to change everything. And then he went a different route. And then he delivers, and he says, at that point, I finally was able to be the Chris Jericho that I wanted to be.
Yeah, because he even said he went to acting classes, and they told him, like, if you believe in something, it doesn't matter how stupid it is. If you present it in a legit way and you believe it, the people watching will also believe it. Yes. It's when you go out there and you're like, then that's when the fans will. That's when the fans will tear you apart. But if you go out there and you're 100% confident in what you're saying and doing, people will get behind it. That's why Jericho can do these goofy gimmicks, and not saying his gimmicks are goofy, but he can do like Le Champion, little bit of the bubbly, the Painmaker, Y2J, coming out in the suit with the short spiked hair and all this stuff. He can pull off all these different looks, and it gets over because he is 100%, believed in him.
Exactly, yeah, and then that also like gave him like really a new Chris Jericho. He got the feud with Shawn Michaels, like he became the WWE champion.
Now I know there was a lot to talk about, but I'm surprised they didn't talk about that, where like he knocks out Shawn's wife, by accident and all that stuff. Yeah,
exactly, because that was supposed to happen, but like in the heat of the moment, boom. And I guess the wife also, like Shawn Michaels' wife, he said that like you don't hit like punch hard enough. That was her reaction. Because Jericho was really, concerned. Like, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to do that. He's like, he's not the best you can get.
She was egging him on. Yeah, so that was. But there was so much to talk about. Jericho is another one you could do 2 episodes. One, because it'll be ratings, because the AEW star, it's ratings, and also because there was so much to talk about.
Yeah, exactly. And that reign was good. WWE champion. He had a feud with Batista in the middle of that, in the match with Shawn. That the ladder match, that's even better. Like a lot of people love that ladder match. And again, you saw how like he got busted open. That's one of the best.
Was it the WrestleMania match? I believe it was. Or was it
was No Mercy 08?
No. I'm saying when he was like the one night I forget where he was out to eat or whatever, but he's like, I just thought of the ending to our match.
Oh, that's 19. That was okay. Yeah, let's bring it back to 19. He got that match with Shawn, was in the opening match, and this turned out to be like still in the show. It's WrestleMania 19, and like he says like, he got this vision. Like he started like he was actually buying something at Dick's Sports Goods, and then he's like,
okay,
and then he got the whole thing. And then he's like, can I get a piece of paper? And then to the cashier, and he's like, okay, here's the receipt. So he's writing it down. He goes to Shawn. He's like, hey, I have like the ending of the match. And like, this is how it's going to go. And it's legit because I have the beginning. So they put the match together in 10 minutes, they said.
Yeah, because both of them were pros. They could call it in the ring. They didn't need to be guys that are just like, we got to script everything, move by move. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Corkscrew, yeah. Zaba, hip toss, no, like you said. So, like, Jericho, again, mind for the business. Every single time, like you said, like this and then 19, and then he 08, again. Like,
and also, what did you think of the way Jericho talks and the way about himself and everything? Because we mentioned it with Goldberg, where Goldberg feels really full of himself, and he was cocky, and he was like, he thought he was, the best thing in wrestling ever. And Jericho kind of gave me a little bit of similar vibes, but he wasn't as cocky with his delivery, and he was also, everything he says though is true. Yeah. Where he was like, he's never like, I was the best ever or whatever. But when Jericho talks highly of himself, because people don't like to hear other people brag. Let's be honest. Nobody likes when somebody brags about themselves. People like when you're humble. But his bragging, I feel, was all like justified in this. But I could definitely see some people being like, Jericho's full of himself, blah, blah, blah. Did you kind of get that similar vibes a little bit?
Well, like you said, it's because he's done so much in wrestling, and also like he's been successful everywhere else also because the podcast he's done. Remember, he did Dancing with the Stars. He hosted Tough and Out. Like he's done so many other stuff, other projects that he does, and at the same time, every single thing like you said he's done. It's actually been successful. Remember, like Bobbly now in AEW, all of that. Remember the list. We're going to talk about the list in a little bit. But all of those, like he's able to reinvent himself. To me, that is the Michael Jackson, like that's the Madonna of like pro wrestling is Chris Jericho. But like you said, Goldberg is just like, oh yeah, I beat people in 3 seconds. Yeah. And I'm still legit, and still they pay me $3 million for like, 2 seconds of a match. So like for me, at least Jericho, you can tell like he does contribute to like the younger generations and all of that. So like we're gonna go like again, we moved to like you said like 2017 when he comes back. Like at the beginning again, he didn't talk at all. 2015, 16, he didn't talk. He has then like finally the list, but before that he challenged CM Punk on 2012. He had that feud with him, not the greatest feud, but like at least he was able to have a championship match at WrestleMania. So now tell me a little bit about the list, the friendship with Kevin Owens. That was one of the greatest, feuds that he had, I think. For me.
Yeah, and I agree with you, and that's why I said when he says stuff like, "Oh, we were the best feud and the best program on Raw," people might be like, "Oh, that sounds cocky. It sounds like he's full of himself," but he's not wrong. That was the best thing. Him and Kevin Owens, eventually Owens wins the Universal Championship. That's all this legit stuff. It's building up, and he does the huge festival of friendship. And, he's like, oh, this is what I have planned. He didn't name names. I'm going to probably say Kevin Dunn. But he's like, he didn't name names, but they were like, oh, this is too flashy. It's too comedy. It's bullshit. And they wanted to change it. And he's like, no. He's like, Vince said it's okay. And they're like, yeah, bullshit, because Vince wasn't there. He's like, oh, let me text Vince. Vince is like, yeah, why would we change it? He's like, yeah, do it as we planned. And then they were like, so. He's like, and then we did it because they thought the list of Kevin Owens was too corny.
Yes.
But it's like, that is what sold it, because Jericho gave him all this stuff, the creation of man with the finger pointing and all this stuff. Yeah, and then Kevin Owens was like, hey, I'm sorry, I only got you something, like one little thing. It's nowhere near as good as what you got me, but I hope you still like it. He's like, oh, it's a new list. And then when they do the camera shot, he lifts it up. You see the back of the clipboard, the list of Kevin Owens. He's like, why is my name on it?
Yes.
Boom.
Oh yeah.
And he's like, that was supposed to be, the one of the main events of WrestleMania that year. It's supposed to be Kevin Owens going into there as champion, and then it was going to be Chris Jericho challenging him, beating him. He said this would have been the first time I was, a heavyweight champion as a babyface. Yeah. And and they knew Goldberg was coming back, so the whole plan was he was going to beat Owens and then drop it to Goldberg. He's like, that's fine. Then I can just go right off into the sunset, do whatever I want. And, he was fine with it.
Judas had come
and then they were like, oh, well, we're kind of thinking Goldberg and Brock. And he was still like, okay, whatever. I get it. That's big money. Whatever. People want to see them because last time they had a match, it was bullshit at Mania. This is kind of like the do-over. And, putting the title on the line makes it even better. So he understood it. But then when they were like, oh, your second match. He's like, that's what really kind of took the wind out of his sails, really got under his skin. Because first match, what do we say? You always start out hot with a first match. But then the second match is kind of like the cool down. That's when you're like, okay, that's when you go take a shit. That's when you get some snacks. That's when you go on your phone. The second match is usually one people don't care about, unfortunately. Yes.
And that's the spot that they put him in. That was the first Mania that we watched like together. And also like just let me elaborate a little bit more on that. You were right with Kevin Dunn. The other person that was like saying all these things in the Festival of Friendship is Triple H. Triple H was in charge that night, and that's why he didn't want to give names. That's why he's like, oh, so bullshit. We're not doing that. They end up doing it, and then he changed his mind.
He should have just said terrorizing.
Yeah, or he would have said terrorizing. Fine, and that's why he apologized later on. And also at that time, Jean-Paul, he was actually resigning short-term deals, Jericho. Because he was supposed to go with Fozzy, this big tour. Judas had just come out. That album had just come out. And, the popularity of the list and the friendship with Kevin Owens kept going and going and going. That's why they gave him the United States Championship. And then he became a Grand Slam. But, they had all these things. But, again, it was a monthly, renewal of the contract. So you saw, you said, they changed all this whole thing. And remember, the match at Mania was okay. But remember, if you saw the Kevin Owens thing, the 24, he's like, with Benz, are we good? Oh, that was terrible. Oh, yeah, I hated it.
Well, I think he was just pissed that Jericho was... Because when that... Was that the time where he wanted... or was that when he left a previous time when he wanted Jericho to come back and he's like, no, you only booked me for this show. So I think that was...
that's a little later. I mean, remember, he goes like, oh, you don't like to do jobs anymore? He's like, oh, no. He's like, no. He's like, it's fine. He's like, that was in 05. But he's always been with Jericho in that instance. Like you said, it's like monthly renewals. It's always been Vince, hey, do this 2 dates and we're good. With a short-term deal. But, that's how good, like, in the popularity of Jericho and the list was with
and like you said, though, the match, it wasn't bad, but it wasn't memorable. But if the title was on the line, these guys would have had a different match and it would have been memorable. How would you feel like, so I don't blame them because it's we're going to be legit. And then they take that away from you.
Oh, yeah.
And it's okay.
And remember that he did a big job also like in 2013 with Fandango. He gave him like his first and meaningful feud, right there.
Yeah.
And then there's a video also if you guys want to see it on YouTube, like how he talks about the whole feud with Fandango. And Vince is like, oh, well, Y2J is going to pull over him. And then it's like, oh, really? Am I going to do that? And Taker's like, hey, whatever Vince tells you, make sure you do it because, hey, maybe the paycheck is going to be legit. And then he did.
Oh, and then, yeah, speaking of Taker, because after that Mania, then he's like, oh, Saudi Arabia show. And they're just like, oh, you and Taker in a casket match. He's like, oh, that's cool. Undertaker and I really haven't crossed paths too many times, but it'll still be legit. He's like, oh, and then, then all of a sudden it's, oh, the Prince of Saudi Arabia wants Rusev. He's like, I'm sorry, but the Prince did not want Rusev.
Oh, no. Why they changed that is because he went and did the match with Kenny Omega. Don Callis was the one that did the match, helped out.
He was fine, and that's the thing. He said Vince was fine with Omega because he's like, you're going to be waving the WWE flag. Everybody knows Chris Jericho's WWE. We'll get some of the New Japan audience to watch WWE. And then he attacked Naito. He's like, what are you doing? And he's like, oh, well, I want to leave with my heats just in case, a future opportunity. You don't just want to leave and be done. Always set something up. But I think that rubbed Vince the wrong way. Because if Vince says, yeah, you can do one match, that's cool. You try to do two.
Not a whole program.
Yeah.
And remember what happened in that program. Because I know you, like, besides being the best booker, you also remember everything. He won the Intercontinental Championship.
Yeah.
So, like, that made it even longer because he ended up prolonging up to the next Wrestle Kingdom. And that's when he dropped the IC belt. I think it was tonight also. So, you said that's when Vince kind of got a little bit upset. It's like, oh, let's put Rusev in it. And Jericho, he was in that event, but only in the Battle Royal. And then he lasted like probably 50 seconds into it. That was it. And then Don, get the hell out of here. So they only flew him for that. Remember, he was in also like the Raw, the 25th, Raw 25. That's when he had like a little thing with Elias that they were playing guitars and all of that. So that was it. That was his end of like the WWE programming. And then he goes to Painmaker, all of that. I mean, and then with all of that, Tony Khan says that, okay, let's do AEW. And then, he said he has this group of guys. And now, you do AEW also, so that's why you know more about all of this. But, like, he puts all these guys together that he says, like, they were never on TV. They didn't know how to make TV.
And I actually like how Jericho said it because it's what everybody else was saying. It's like Tony Khan, it just aligned. His contract, he wasn't really with WWE. And all these other guys were free agents. Tony Khan, he's like, how do you start a wrestling promotion? You need a guy with money and passion. And that was Tony Khan. So it was just like, okay, well, then let's get all these guys going. And he's like, I was the biggest name, so I was the biggest draw. And now everybody's knowing how good these guys are. And, of course, Stone Cold's like, oh, yeah, the Bucks and them, they're legit. And it's like, really? But,
how much did you pay him? How much did you pay Stone Cold some money to get that line? Like you said, and also he explains like the same thing is like now I feel like a little bit of Vince McMahon in AEW because everybody comes for advice. I gotta tell him what to do, and I know that like a lot of the success of like AEW is Jericho. Because remember when we said don't disrespect the reps, make sure you're following their advice because it looks stupid when you like sell, follow all of these things. So like he did talk a little bit about AEW, not in depth, but like he gave a little bit of like insight of what they can do, how Kenny Omega and all of that. He never mentioned Cody though. That's the one thing he never said Cody was we hate
no, they actually did say Cody. He did mention he's like, oh yeah, he said how he had the name recognition. He said yeah, Cody to a certain extent and all this stuff, but yeah, I mean he did. It was just a quick. Little throwaway.
Yeah, it was a little throw-in. So, like, yeah, this is like a great, interview for you guys. I feel that, like, this is what, like, Y2J summarizes his career. Like, please go watch it because it's, like, really great. It's 2 hours. It's a little bit longer. But we got to see all of these things. And then they also, like, Stone Cold says, like, well, when are you thinking about retiring? He's like, well, when I'm just a parody of myself. So, kind of, like, going into, like, the Undertaker's mindset is, like, when I can no longer do it.
He even said he's like, "Oh, I'm still putting on some of the best matches and all this." It's like,
yeah, exactly. I was thinking the same thing. Okay, oh yeah, a lot of people say that like MJF and Chris Jericho against the Young Bucks was the best match of Revolution. No, it wasn't. Of course he has to plug himself.
I mean that match actually wasn't bad though. Like looking back, especially how that main event, but
yeah, exactly. But I mean, the fact that he can still have matches, yeah. He can still go like that's your line. He can still go, but can he still be like the main event, maybe like the best match of the night every single time? No. He has to be a lot more paceful, all of that. But that's what we got. And family, that was a great interview. I think please go watch it, and we're gonna be keep delivering all these episodes of the Stone Cold podcast. This one, I think that like the forbidden door was open. So when maybe what would be great is like either like he needs to be Triple H, he needs to be one of those guys, or for example like a Kenny Omega. Can you have Kenny Omega into the show? Like
I don't think they'll do. I don't ever see that happening. I just see now maybe Stone Cold not affiliated with WWE if he is his own, but I don't ever see that being on the Peacock under the WWE banner. Yeah. Jericho makes sense because he wrestled the majority of his career there. Yeah. But I mean, it's exciting to see, who they're going to bring on next. And if this, we already saw the Big Show, maybe somebody like Christian, maybe Sting, people like that we could see. So,
Oh, yeah, it's true. It's true that there will be guys that, like, again, like, have the WWE pass and they can do that. Or, like you said, when it comes to WWE itself.
I think the biggest shocker one would be Cody. That would be the biggest,
Well, but that would be bad because.
What I'd love to see? I'd love to see Stone Cold sitting in the middle instead of at the end, and you have Cody and you have Triple H. That's what I want to see.
That would be a great moment. I was okay. Why did you do that thing? And like,
why did you break my throne?
Oh, yeah.
He's like, people hate you and Brandy more than me and Steph.
Yeah. It's like the best couple in wrestling is me and Steph, not you and Brandy. Like, it's like, get it together, buddy. But there you go. So, family, thank you so very much. We really appreciate every single thing that you do for the show. We love you, and don't forget to please subscribe, hit that bell for notifications, and also like give the video a like. Let us know like in the comments like what are your best moments from Chris Jericho. And tomorrow we're going to be talking about Monday Night Raw and all of that. So where else can they find us in the social media world, Paul?
Exactly. And don't forget to follow us, Rope Break on Facebook, OG Rope Break on Twitter, Original Rope Break on Instagram, and of course right here on YouTube, the home of the #1 podcast in the YouTube wrestling community, the Original Rope Break.
So family, we'll see you. You and me have one more thing left to say, and that is